Let's talk a little bit about transform files. The basic idea with a transform is that you select information out of an instance using that transform and you combine it with tags, and in our case those tags are mostly going to be HTML tags, and you use that to create an output file. So there's the concept of the input, and the input is the instance. The input is the file that you're going to get values out of. Then there's the transform that you apply to the instance, and that's the way to think about it. The transform is applied to the instance. When the transform is applied to the instance, it creates an output file, and that output file is a combination of the values from the input file and the tags and the commands that are in the transform file. So the transform file contains structure, and that structure is able to pull values out of the instance file, combine them with the native tagging of whatever the output format is, and in our case that's mostly going to be HTML, and then create an output file. So an HTML file is going to consist of HTML tags that are in the transform, as well as XSL commands that pull things out of the instance and combine them with those XML tags. So that's the kind of the technical way to think about it. The way that I really like to think about these transforms is that they give you different views of the instance file. The instance file is your information base. It has all the information that you've captured about a particular subject matter. And then each of those transforms cuts that instance in a different way and gives the end user a view of that instance. So for example, it'll give the end user a view of one item of information. If we have movie items in our instance, it'll give you a view of one item in a way that's user-friendly. So you can't just give the instance to an end user, you have to give the end user something that they can deal with, like an HTML file. So one cut of that instance, one transform, one view of that instance could be a particular item of that instance, a particular movie, let's say. Another view of the instance could be a navigational view, where you take one of the access structures that's in the instance and you transform that into navigation. You may take an outline that's in the instance, for example, and transform it into a menu that drops down and gives the user different options of how to navigate the site. Excuse me. Transforms, as are schemas, are also XML files. So we have our three main kinds of XML files. We have instances, schemas, and transforms, and this is the final one for us to talk about. Now you're almost in a position for me, once I pulled these apart, and you have the idea that the instance contains the information, the schema contains the rules, and the transform transforms that information into an end user view of the information. Now that I've pulled them back apart, let me slam them all back together again and say all three of those kinds of XML files are all actually instance files. As I spoke about with the schema is an XML file, the schema is an instance, as well as the transform. The transform is also an instance. And the practical considerations, aside from the philosophical considerations of how can you use XML to transform XML, the practical considerations are that transform file has to remain well formed. If it's not well formed, then it won't work as a transform. So that's really the practical implication of transform files being XML files. So transforms are probably the hardest thing technically that we'll do in this class. Is a lot to understand. There's a lot of commands. You can work for years and years with transforms. They're like programs, and so give them time to sink in. And make sure, if you don't understand anything else about transforms, that you understand this idea of a view, a cut, a way of looking at the instance that's particular to an end user's needs.